Hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of the LeanTossup CDL betting podcast. I'm joined, as always, by Ryan of CDL of at CDLMetrics on Twitter. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. I am excited for the last week of the Major 2 qualifiers. Should be a good one as always. Again, a lot of COD. We're going just about every week now. The Major kicks off next weekend. Obviously, March Madness is in full swing. Baseball spring training's underway. Again, I talked about it last week. One of my favorite times of the year from a sports perspective. But yeah, here to talk COD as always.
For sure. And I mean, so just gonna hit on quickly something we talked about last weekend because last week we advised you guys to bet on Florida to win the major outright and to reach the final. Florida to reach the final now is plus 750. So I was able to get in at plus 2800, 28 to 1. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And to win outright, it's down to 16 to 1 from 66 to 1. So, that's really cool. That being said, though, Florida is not even the biggest winners in terms of the futures market this week. The biggest winner is actually Boston Breach. They're down to 10 to 1 to win the major. What are they to reach the final here? 450 to reach the final. That's crazy and insane on that. A lot of hype on Boston, but we were actually on Boston a lot last weekend too. Um, what do you think about this? Do you think that this is like legitimate for Boston, or do you think that this is kind of like is Boston a little overhyped here? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's tough. Boston is a tough read for me because my model doesn't really take into account recent performance. Obviously, the results are in the model, but it doesn't really weight those any more than an older match. So Boston's recent run of success is impressive. They're 3-0 so far in qualifiers. They had a good showing at the first major. I believe they lost their first match versus FaZe, but went on a nice little run in losers bracket. And yeah, like overall their season's been good, and they're kind of finding form right now. I know there's a whole thing that just came out yesterday with Methods and Alley Cat might be dating, probably are dating. There's this whole thing on Twitch last night that was kind of fun. So and I saw he started streaming a few hours ago too. So I don't know if there's more drama going on now with that. But anyway, yeah, Boston is a fun team. I don't think I would take them at 10 to 1 to win the final. I actually think that's maybe one of the worst bets you could make. And again, they're hot, so that could carry over into the major. They should get a good seed. Like there's a realistic shot they could end up with the number one seed. I think it's more likely they probably get the number two, maybe number three, if they slip up a little bit here this weekend. But if you're in that position, you are in a good spot to rattle off some wins and maybe make the finals. Yeah, plus 450 to reach the major final. I like a little more, but I still don't love it. So yeah, hopefully you took Florida last week when we gave out that pick. Right, they were 66 to 1 to win the major, and like 28 to 1 just to reach the major final. Yeah, those odds have dropped drastically despite their loss last week against Optic. So just just the odds not shifting quick enough. We were able to take advantage of that. Now, obviously, there's a very good chance that the Mutineers don't make it to the major final or don't win it. But we're looking for value here whenever we can get it, and that was a value play. As the major seeding kind of comes together with this last week, it's going to be a little harder to find edges with teams. I do think the market gets pretty well in order as we approach the major, and it will really lock in next week right before the major. But if you're looking for any last minute picks on the futures market, I do have some that have sprung up last week. And this is a team I know you picked. I don't know if it was to win or to reach the major, but I see value on them now. London Royal Ravens to reach the major at plus 350. I don't think that's bad value. Again, a team that lost last week, like the Mutineers did, but they should still have a high seed. Right now, I project them as the number 3 seed. I think right now they are the number 3 seed if the major started today. And that's a good spot, especially when you think about where Atlanta might be seeded. We talked about it last week. Atlanta's seeding is gonna cause some issues, I think, with the major. I have them as a 4 or 5 seed. That's kind of where they're sitting right now. So if that holds true, and Optic can hold the number 1 seed, those two teams are likely to meet in the second round, meaning there might be value for teams that are in that 3-6 or 2-7 side of the bracket. So that those are teams like Boston, London, probably maybe Toronto if they can get some easy wins this weekend. So those teams I like, but yeah, if you are going to take something this week, I think London to reach the final is good. I think Toronto to reach the final is good, plus 650 I see. And even Minnesota, that's a bit of a long shot, but again, a team that if they can handle business this weekend against New York, they'll have 3 wins and should start in winners bracket. They are currently 22-1 to reach the major final. So a couple of long shot picks, but I don't hate any of them.
Yeah, I can agree with that. The thing is, and I'll tell you what, because I'm just looking at this now, if you want to bet on Boston to win the major, so what happens is these books have been updating to win the major and to make the finals odds. Here's something they haven't been updating: the MVP odds. So,
True.
because remember we talked about Awakening was 80-1 last week. We're like that's essentially a proxy bet for Florida to win. Guess who's 150-1 to be Major 2 MVP?
Still awakening?
Nope, Methods.
Oh, okay.
He is he's the lowest on he's the highest on Boston. That is like that seems it's actually no, sorry, technically not. Technically Capsule's 125-1. So Methods 150-1. So a $10 bet on Methods would return $1,500. That's
Not
very
bad.
tempting. That
Yeah,
like if you
instead of if you're not interested in the 10-1 and you want to go way deep, like yeah, I would definitely rather pick Cap at 125, Methods at 100-1. It seems like one of those would get it if they do win. Um and yeah, I just think the MVP market makes a lot more opportunities for bettors like us. So yeah, I love it.
mm, Yeah. All right. Well, moving on to the lines now. For this week's games, we've got some interesting games this week. This is the last week of the major, well, major qualifiers, I should specify. Then you have after this, then obviously the next week is the major that'll start on Thursday. So you're gonna probably record the podcast earlier next week because of that. And then after that, just a quick scheduling update. So they actually have, I didn't notice at the time, but they actually have fully released the schedule going forward after that. So the week after Major 2 is the All Star weekend. That's the 1v1s and All Star games. We might actually be able to talk about that because of the player grades. So we'll talk about that maybe later. But then the week after that is basically an off week. Nothing is happening that next week, which is interesting because that's the first bye week since the beginning of Major 2. It's also interesting that it's the week of April 16th because actually the USFL opening weekend. Now, again, you know that we love our conspiracy that they schedule the CDL around the NFL, and that's probably true. But this is probably just it's probably an accident that happened that way.
Yeah, I gotta think it is.
I'm not gonna go down that far. That the conspiracy rabbit hole that they deliberately scheduled the one break week as the start the opening weekend of a random football league. But that's okay. But again, if you have no Call of Duty to watch and you're like us and you're football fans, watch the USFL. Then after that, then there's a Warzone weekend, which is I'm not sure how that's going to work. They're going to figure that out. And then the weekend after that, that's when there's the combined challengers major, and then right back there, and then we're back into major 3. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff coming up, and yeah, we're gonna have some interesting couple of weeks there, and with only 1 week off. So moving on to the lines this week, we start off with Friday afternoon: Paris Legion versus Toronto Ultra. Paris plus 2.5 minus 170. Toronto minus 2.5 plus 130. Paris to win plus 425. Ultra win minus 700 on the money line. Over 3.5 minus 165. Under 3.5 plus 125. Um, my model here has like Ultra with a pretty high chance of winning this game. Obviously, I got this as a 3-1. I don't. I mean, the thing of it, I do have this as a 3-1, but this kind of screams to me as classic, kind of like Toronto take like getting it done. This is like Toronto when they just beat up on a bad team, usually 3-0. I don't necessarily hate the minus 130. I am a little if Paris breaks through its hard point randomly, which is kind of hilarious. But I mean, I wouldn't hate betting on like some random spreads here or there, like a search and destroy spread or something like that. Do you have any thoughts here, or do you think this is do you have any hope for Paris here on the plus 2.5, or maybe even a plus 1.5, or are you on Ultra getting the job done here?
Yeah, no, this is it screams Toronto. I think the prices are about right. Yeah, I see money line minus 700. To win in a sweep is plus 130 for Toronto. I don't love it, but you can convince me. Right, you said kind of do or die for Toronto. They're 1-2 so far in their qualifiers, losing their last two after beating Minnesota in week one. So thankfully for them, this last week is very, very easy. It's about as easy as it gets. You get Paris on Friday afternoon, and then you are also the last match of the weekend against New York. Now, New York has a new roster. They won their last match. Good for them. I still think they're a pretty bad team. So very likely that Toronto can go 2-0 this weekend. And yeah, I don't think they're like looking past Paris. I think they're definitely locked in for this one. Because yeah, winners bracket is there for the taking for them. They just got to take care of business themselves, and I think they do. I don't know if I'm going to take anything on this game. You can maybe convince me of like a Toronto minus 1.5 in search. I think Paris's search and destroy is very bad. Granted, they've improved all of their game modes a little bit, like since Major 1, but they're still 0-4 in qualifiers this stage. They do have two reverse sweeps, so if one of those maps, two of those maps go the other way, they could be 2-2, but they're not. They're 0-4. And yeah, teams that are bad are going to get reverse swept more than teams that are good. Like that's just how it goes. So, yes, they were close, but they got to get it done, right? You got to close out a series at some point. And the only one they have closed out is again in a map 5 at Major 1 against a reeling Seattle Surge team. So, yeah, Paris still the worst team in the league. I give them about a 9% chance to win this game. So it's not nothing. I give them. I think they do. They probably don't get swept. I think they cover the plus 2.5 about 57% of the time, but that doesn't justify the minus 170 price on that. Um, so yeah, I'm thinking a Toronto 3-0. Maybe Paris scratch out that game one hard point if they win the coin flip, or maybe they could take the control if they get the preferred map. But all in all, it really feels like Toronto closed this out in 4 maps or less.
Yeah. Um. Again, this is kind of one where you can take like Toronto minus 1.5. I will say that for Ultra, it seemed like they finally learned how to play hardpoint in Vanguard in that second map against Atlanta, the Tuscan hardpoint. Um, they did really well there. I thought they had it. They ended up losing it. But for a while there, they were really taking the fight to Atlanta, and I mean, I wanted to again. The thing is, it's sad that the stats won't reflect how well they were playing in that one because at the end, FaZe still outslayed them. But like, I think they finally kind of are starting to learn how to play hardpoint in Vanguard, and I think that if they're able to do that and catch on a bit, watch out for this team. Right, this team could be very dangerous going forward. Next up, Friday afternoon, Thieves versus Gorillas. Thieves minus 1.5 is even, plus 100. LAG plus 1.5 is minus 130. LA Thieves on the money line minus 220. LAG on the money line plus 165. Over 4.5 plus 165. Under 4.5 minus 220. So I've actually got this as like basically dead even. I've got this as LAG 52% of the chance, 52% chance to win. So clearly I see value on the plus 1.5, plus 165. I will also use this as an opportunity to bring in our preferred Betway boost. And guess which moneyline team is in the Betway boost?
LA Thieves.
Yes, Toronto Ultra, LA Thieves, and Atlanta FaZe all to win. So I think we know how this match is going to go. And to be honest, it actually makes sense, right? This Thieves team is reeling, right? And how many times when we talk about Call of Duty do we see like Team A is like a well-known team that has had shown strong results in the past, and they are in a slump and they're reeling versus team that is upstart and doing overperforming expectations. How many times has like team with name ever won that match? Like there's so many examples of it, right? Seattle against Paris. Like there's so many clear examples of this going badly and the upstart team winning. What do you think here? Or do you are you with me on Gorillas or are you taking Thieves here?
I am. Again, I think these prices are about right, but I do lean to the LA Gorillas side, and it does worry me a little bit because I don't know who is like really enthusiastic to bet on Thieves at minus 220 on the money line or at even to cover a map and a half. Like I don't know. This team is they're still good. I do think Thieves are a better team than Gorillas despite the recent records. Right, Thieves are 0-3 so far in qualifiers for Major 2, and LA Gorillas, to a lot of people's surprise, are 2-1, I believe. Yeah, 2-1. Um, yeah, good for Gorillas. I do think Gorillas make it out into winners bracket, and I think Thieves don't. Now, Thieves are favored in both their matches. This one against Gorillas, and then the one tomorrow, or the one on Saturday against Seattle Surge, and we'll get to that one in a bit. So all hope is not lost for Thieves, right? They put up some half decent performances. Right? They got reverse swept against Minnesota. That hurts bad. Minnesota is not a great team. They're a fine team, but you would like to close out against a team like them. Um, week one, I believe they lost to London. I want to say in a sweep. That one did not look good. And then I believe they played Atlanta FaZe, and I think they lost in 5 maps. Let me go through here, see what I can find. Like it wasn't the worst loss in the world, if I remember correctly. Let's see here. LA Thieves. I'm sorry, they played Optic Texas. That's right. That was the last match of week one. And ended up winning, or I'm sorry, losing in a round 11 on Tuscan Search. They had 2 rounds to close it out, if I remember correctly, and couldn't get either one. So, right, they're so close to being 2-1 in this stage. Um, LA Gorillas are 2-1. Good for them again. Um, and yeah, I kind of lean Gorillas. I just worry that everyone likes Gorillas. If you like them a lot, like if you think this game is closer to a 50-50, then I would take Gorillas right now because I just can't see people loading up on Thieves and driving their price up. I see it happening the other way where maybe Thieves dip below minus 200 on the money line. LAG gets to plus 150 or lower on theirs, and then it kind of drives the value out of this game. So I think I'll stay away for it for now, but I like Thieves to win the match, but Gorillas, yeah, minus 130 ain't bad. Plus 1.5 at minus 130. It's not bad, but I don't think it's something I'm willing to actually take. So
I will actually say that LA Thieves have actually like I mean it didn't open this price in this book. I believe the price actually opened up plus 150 for Gorilla. So people have actually already bet up Thieves.
huh.
So
Okay.
yeah, so there actually has already in the on Bet365, which is where I know it opened on Sunday night. LAG was plus 150. They're still plus 150 there. But Bodog has LAG at plus 165. Now, actually, to be honest, lines change on Bodog before they change on Bovada before they change on Bet365. So, would not be surprised to see an upgrade in price there in on LAG. But yeah, no, I kind of think that yeah, I think of it again. You stop overestimating the betting public, right? We know who these people are. They're gonna bet on these. They're not they're not sitting here with sharp models and stuff like that. I mean, here's like we were on Rocker, right? We were like we gave Rocker a chance and we cleaned up on that, right? We got like what plus 250, plus 137. Like we got amazing price. Like actually we got a ridiculous amount on that. So no, like just because we see something doesn't mean that it's wrong, right? And honestly, getting negative closing line value, like I bet this at a different price already. I'm actually getting negative closing line value, and I'm fine with that. Most of the time, I get negative closing line value on CDL bets. It usually does pretty well. Um, moving on to the last game on Friday night here. We've got FaZe versus Mutineers. FaZe minus 1.5, minus 145. Mutineers plus 1.5, plus 110. FaZe minus 350 on the money line. Florida plus 250 on the money line. FaZe over 3.5, minus 260. Florida under 3.5, plus 190. Here's the thing. My model was very unimpressed with Florida performance last week. It gives it a thumbs down, or in the case of Florida, two tentacles down, I guess. Um, Here's the thing though. Like my model says phase, but like I think we all know who's gonna win this match. Like I think Florida's gonna win this match. Honestly, I swear. Like they'll underperform against Optic, and then they'll come out and they'll beat phase. Watch. Like this is we all know Florida can do it. And like FaZe looks vulnerable. Like that was scary a little bit there against Ultra, right? Like, and the thing is, the match against Florida's match against Optic was actually a lot closer than people's than the final scoring line looked. Right? It was a Bocage. They lost to Bocage by 20 points. It's a little on the highish side for a close Bocage, but it was still very close. It went to time, as the classic Optic thing to do is to take a Bocage to time. The search that wasn't close. That's fine. Florida needs to clean up their Berlin search. That's completely fine and understandable, but the control, I didn't even realize how close it was. Um, the first time I was watching it, I wasn't watching it with sound, so then I didn't hear what the casters were saying. But basically, in that search, in the control, the only reason Florida was on offense round five, sorry, was because they were completely tied in kills, and the default is when they're tied, when kills are tied, it just switches from current ones to what it currently was. So Florida was on defense round four, so then they were on offense round five. That's the only reason why Florida actually lost that control. They could have easily won that control, definitely could have won the next hard point and taken it to game five. And then who knows what happens in the game five, right? So no, I am not like I'm not sitting here thinking like Florida definitely has a shot here. There's some money coming on phase. This opened at I think plus 225, plus 100 on the plus 1.5. So like there's some money coming in on phase, but like if I'm betting anything in this match, I'm betting Florida even against my model. What do you think here?
Yeah, again, not a match I love, but I do slightly side with Florida as well. Yeah, plus 110 to cover a map and a half, I don't think is bad. It can definitely be justified. And yeah, you talked about their match last week, a lot closer than it may have seemed. And I just want to talk about Florida for a sec. Like, how perfect is it that they are 2-1 in match count and 6-3 in map count? Like 2 sweeps that they've won, and then they got swept once. Like, that's Florida for you. Now, will this one be a sweep of Atlanta FaZe, or will they get swept? Those are the only 2 outcomes. So maybe Florida minus 2.5 might be the play. No, just kidding on that. But yeah, Florida, I think is still the right play. And I'll tell you what, man, if Florida can pull this out, FaZe end up losing this match, which could very well happen. I do think they're in serious jeopardy of starting in losers bracket. They would move down to 2-2 after this loss, and then they'd have to play Optic Texas later in the week. And as we all know, they're the number 1 team in the game, so that could also be a loss. That would put them at 2-3. And when you're at 2-3, you put yourself in jeopardy of starting in losers bracket just based on tiebreakers, really. When we're only playing 5 matches every qualifying stage, there are going to be some 2-3 teams that start in winners bracket. There's going to be some 2-3 teams that start in losers bracket. So FaZe could find themselves in that situation, which would be shocking to say the least. I do think FaZe probably get it done 3-1 here. I think we maybe see a Bocage map 1. Could be the best Bocage we see all year. These teams are very good at that. But, if Gavudu control gets played, Florida's got a shot. And Florida's honestly got a shot in just about every mode against FaZe. FaZe are just not what they were last year. They're still a very good team. But, yeah, I think I lean Atlanta to win the series. But, yeah, Florida at plus 110 to cover a map and a half, I think makes some sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do really like the Florida pick there. Don't bet the mortgage on it because it is Florida. But yeah, I mean as I think you were saying before, the Florida way is 6-3 in map counts, 2-1 in series counts, three sweeps. Moving on to Saturday, we have Surge versus Thieves. Surge plus 1.5 minus 155. Thieves minus 1.5 plus 120. Surge plus 135 on the money line. Thieves minus 175. Over 4.5 plus 160. Plus 160. Under 4.5 minus 210. So this one is interesting because the thing is, like, I feel like you have to kind of pair this with the LAG match, and when you're talking about them, because the thing of it is, if LAG wins, then like suddenly this match becomes a pick, right? So if you want to bet on Seattle, you probably need to bet on Seattle early. My model actually does favor Seattle here, which is kind of hilarious. But I don't know. Like, is this team really going to go 0-5? Like, where could this market bottom out, right? Like, and that's the thing, right? Like, if you want to bet on this Surge team now, like, what are some of the spreads here? You got plus 26.5 map one. That's actually pretty cool. Um, what else have we got here? Minus 1.5 in the control. That's not bad. Plus 1.5 in the map. So they're finally map spreads are finally back on Bodog. So thank God for that. But I mean, yeah, if you like Seattle, my model definitely likes Seattle. I think this is a time. This is the time to bet Seattle is now rather than later. What do you think on this? Do you think, are you giving Thieves much of a, like? Do you think Thieves have a better chance against Seattle, or do you think they have a better chance against LAG? What does your model say?
For sure, a better chance against LAG. Like your model, I have this close to a 50-50. I still have Thieves slightly favored, 52% favorites, which means there's value on Seattle at plus 135 on the money line, or if you want to take them plus a map and a half at minus 155. I think both, you can kind of play it however you want. Um, right, the one kind of glaring weakness for Seattle is hard point. So a Thieves 3-1, if they do win the series, it's probably got to be a 3-1. But Thieves have their own struggles, right? Search hasn't been great. It's been better, but it's still not great. Their control is also lacking. I think Seattle has an edge there. Yeah, it's close to a coin flip, so I'll take Seattle. And yeah, like you, I think I'll take them early because I think LAG put up a fight against Thieves on Friday, and if that's the case, this Seattle price might drop to even money, right? It could get that far down. So yeah, I think Seattle now is the play. If you think Thieves, turn things around and take care of LAG, then it might be a good idea just to take Thieves now. But I really think LAG put up a fight. So I also lean Seattle. No preference really, money line or spread. I think both are good. So just matters, or all that matters is how much risk you want to put into it. This match is, I mean, hugely consequential for losers bracket implications. Right now, Surge sit at 10th. They're 1-3. So this is their last match of the qualifying stage. They got to get a win if they want to get a chance to get into winners bracket, and they'll need some help with tiebreakers. They'll probably need New York to lose their matches, Toronto to lose their matches. Problem is, Toronto and New York play each other. They might need a 2-1 team to drop. So if you're Thieves, right, you take out LAG on Friday, that drops them to 2-2. You get up to 1-3. If LAG can lose again and you can take another win, you'll get to that 2-3. You'll have the head-to-head on LAG. It's just a lot needed for both these teams. I do think both end up in losers bracket, partly because they're playing each other, and partly because they've had some tough schedules for this qualifying stage, and they're just struggling. Like there's no way around it. Both these teams have been better this year than they are now. So slightly into Seattle. I think when all is said and done, Thieves win one of their two matches this weekend, whether it's against LAG or against Seattle. I think 1-4 is probably the most likely outcome. That being said, I think Seattle 1-4, 2-3. It's kind of a toss up as to where they end up, but both will be hovering around that 9 or 10 seed, I imagine. So good luck to them in the major. If that's the case, you got to rattle off 6 in a row. We talked about futures bets a little earlier. There are some really bad ones. I see Thieves are 20-1 to win the major. If you want to throw away money, like go ahead and do that. Like you're taking a team to win 6 straight matches. Granted, they might be favored in their first one, maybe two. Um, After that, it's going to be tough. So that's not a great idea. Seattle, I see it 33 to 1. Again, not great. Their odds are very, very slim. And yeah, I mean, it'll be a hugely consequential match in the moment, but I think when all is said and done, we'll look back and say, like, oh, well, these teams were just two teams that were destined for losers bracket. So slightly into Seattle. And yeah, I think if you like that, you should take it now.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, this is probably something we'll have more time to talk about it next week because we're going to be talking more about the major. But like, these are two teams that we could be seeing a team change with them after the major. I definitely think that's a strong possibility. Next up, 4:30 on Saturday, Boston Breach versus Florida Mutineers. For some reason, this line is not on Bovada. But it is on Bet365, about the same. So I don't know why it's randomly down on Bovada. I've got, so on Bet365, I got Boston minus 150, Florida plus 110 on the money line, Boston minus 1.5 plus 162, Florida plus 1.5 minus 225, over 4.5 plus 150, under 4.5 minus 200. I mean, the thing of it is, my model actually really likes Boston here, but the thing of it is, though, like, my model likes Boston, but if Florida were to beat Atlanta, then I think my model's gonna like Florida, right? So, like, right now I see value on Boston at the minus 150. Would have liked a smaller number on that, but that's probably okay. Because I've got Boston 3-1 right now. So like minus 1.5 plus 162 is fine. Thing of it is, like, I could see Florida making a game of this, right? Like, if I could see Florida beating Atlanta and then beating Boston, right? I could definitely see that happening. Um, but I could also see Boston doing this. I think at some point there has to be some regression to this Boston team. I think they're really good. I could see Boston going 2-0 this weekend, or I could see them going 1-1 this weekend, or maybe even 0-2 this weekend, right? Like, there's a lot of different things. I just think that maybe this Boston team is just a little overhyped right now, and I think they deserve some of the pricing, but I think that, like, if you look back at who they've beaten, right? Like, they beat a Minnesota team that we don't think is particularly good. But see, the thing is, Minnesota just beat thieves, so people are high in Minnesota. They beat Boston, but that's a methods revenge game. So, and then who else they beat? Didn't they just crush someone like Seattle? Yeah, they beat Seattle, I think.
Hmm.
Um, so no, like, I'm not like I'm not the most like hype about, like, I like this Boston team. I think they could go pretty far. I don't know. I don't hate their like to win the major at 10 to 1. It's a bit high. I'd love a lower price. I wish that price hadn't been, if that price was like 20 or something, I'd take it for sure. But yeah, I think this Boston team is legit. But the thing is, like, if they lose this match or lose one of these matches between them or London, my opinion of them isn't changing, right? Like, I actually kind of like them to win either or match. I don't know. We'll talk about the other one later. But what do you think? Do you think Florida here, the most consistently inconsistent team, or Boston? What do you think?
Yeah, I actually do slightly lean Florida, which might surprise some people. My model's like Florida over Boston pretty much the entire year. And I think a lot of that goes back to Boston's losses, just throughout the year have been not great. And I do include kickoff classic data in my model because they're data points. They happened. I know it was a preseason event, but it's when we got data points, we should use them. So I do have that included. And considering that they lost to that New York roster, granted it was in 5 maps, right? It was a close match. They lost to that New York roster, that original, right? Clayster, Krim, Hydra, Neptune. That's not a great look. They also lost to that New York roster in Major One qualifiers. Again, not a great look. And since then, they've been an improved team, no doubt. I just think people are still maybe sleeping on Florida a bit. They are getting a little bit of love from the broadcast team, so that's good to see. I also see Carson, the stats man. He is tweeting out pro Florida stats. Right, they do lead in a lot of categories for various modes. That's great to see. Yeah, they're just a slept on team. I think yeah, it's close to a 50-50 match. So Florida's plus money. I love it. I do think Boston probably end up 1-1 on the weekend. This is definitely the more winnable match for them. I do still think London are the third best team in the league. Florida hovering in the middle of the pack territory. So if Boston's going to get one, I think it's this one, but I still lean Florida a little bit. Um, and yeah, these odds might shift with the Atlanta Florida match on Friday, but I really don't know. I think Boston's price could only get more expensive. Like I think just based on how that Phase Florida match is likely to go, right? I think we all agree Phase probably wins that. Maybe not, but I think they're the favorite. Um, like if they come out and 3-1 Florida or maybe sweep Florida, Boston's price could go through the roof for that Saturday match. If Florida puts up a fight on Atlanta, even wins the match, I just think people love the Boston breach so much and they love the hot streak that they're on right now. I don't think that Florida price gets super expensive. I think it might go down a little, but I don't mind waiting, seeing if Florida beat Atlanta. If that's the case, I might like double down Boston or on Florida against Boston the next day. There's a lot of different ways to play it. Obviously, if your model likes Boston, take them. If I were you, I would take them early because again, I can't really. I just think it's much more likely that the Boston price gets more expensive as we get closer to match time than Florida's gets more expensive. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah, the thing of it is, I mean, I think that see the problem is if they win, right? Like if they win, if Florida beats Boston, then all of a sudden Boston is an underdog in this matchup, and then I kind of like Boston. But if if Florida beats if Florida loses to Phase, then all of a sudden Florida balloons out to plus 150 against Boston, and I really like Florida, right? So I don't know. This might be a game I leave for now and then come back. I might leave this and then, like again, if Florida starts putting up a fight, I might just immediately betting Florida on this, right? Then or something. I don't know. We'll see because you might be able to like grab a great arbitrage opportunity, right? Like if Florida's down to like plus 120 or something in this match, and then they're playing Phase, and then they take map one, then just immediately bet Florida money line, and then if Florida becomes the favorite over Boston, then bet back Boston money line, and you're like locking in a plus 20 profit. So yeah. Moving on to Friday afternoon ish, night ish. Optic versus LAG. Optic minus 2.5 plus 135. LAG plus 2.5 minus 175. -8. Optic is -800 on the money line. LAG is plus 450. Over 3.5 minus 165. LAG under 3.5 plus 125. I I mean the thing of it is for me sitting here like my model really likes Optic in this match. Like irrationally, I have Optic almost 90% chance to win this match, which to be fair, they should be, right? I mean, they're LEG is the thing of it is like I feel like they're undercounting LEG significantly. I feel like Optic is a better team. Like Optic is the better team, but like LEG is surging, right? And like again, this is the price we're looking at now, but like where will this price be at if LEG beats Thieves, right? And where my model have them if they beat Thieves, right? Because I have them 50-50. If LEG could like decisively beats Thieves, then suddenly this line shifts a lot, right? Because my model, like although my model had value on LEG versus Seattle, and I had LEG versus Seattle, like it didn't like the way they did it. My model kind of was like, yeah, it wasn't particularly convincing. So it's kind of left. It's still like I think if it had Seattle versus LEG playing now, it has it a little closer, but like still basically a toss up, which is kind of fair because they did kind of throw away the game one hard point. They almost threw away the control, and then they almost threw away the hard point too. So this LAG team is far from dominant. But like I'm sitting here and like plus 1.5 against Optic, plus 240, right? This Optic team is playing the next day against Phase, right? Like, is it possible LAG takes them to a game five? Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment, right? Like LAG could steal a hard point from this Optic team. This Optic team is somewhat inconsistent, right? Like looking at some game spreads, like I think you like my model really likes Optic, but like I could see LAG coming within 40 points in a hard point or something, right? Like, so it's hard to say exactly. I don't know. I'm not. This is another heart versus model, and my heart says bet on LEG. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? Are you on Team LEG or are you on Optic here?
I think I'm with you again. Last week we were at odds on a lot of stuff. This week I think we're coming back around. Yeah, I like Optic a little bit. I don't love them, But yeah, like you said, you have them at almost a 90% favorite. I'm right there with you. I have them at an 88% to win. And when you think about it, yeah, that sounds high. Optic on the year have won 83% of their matches. And if you think LAG are a below average team like I do, they've won 40% of their matches. Then you tick that 83% for Optic up a little bit, and hey, you're at 88%. So, yeah, Optic are a very, very heavy favorite, as they should be. But like I really like your point about like individual map spreads, right? Like if Optic are gonna play Bocage against LAG, and we've seen Optic go to time on Bocage a lot, and we've seen LAG in a lot of really tight Bocages, some that they've won, some that they've lost. Like, if you get that spread of, like 20 or more, like that seems like a really, really good play for LAG to cover that. So that could be one way to play it. I don't mind if you want to take Optic just to win in a sweep. I think there's a huge discrepancy in terms of how good these teams are at control. Optic are like just on another level of good. And LAG have been improving, but it's still there's still a lot to be desired. They don't have one map that like necessarily scares you, so I don't think the coin flip matters a ton. They're pretty mediocre at Gavudu and at Tuscan. Optic can play either map too. It's yeah, just everything lines up for Optic, even if they lose the coin flip. I think they know this one's important, right? If we want that number one seed, we got to win this one because right, we might slip up against FaZe tomorrow. So ensure your win here. Beat the LA Gorillas. Could LA Gorillas come in off a hot streak? Right, they might beat Thieves on Friday. They could roll in the next day, take out Optic. That's definitely in the cards. We've seen underdog teams get hot and make a run. I'm just not sure it can get through Optic. LAG has been better, no doubt. They've shown improvements in their game the last week or two, but this is tough. Like this is a tough weekend for LAG. I kind of think they lose both their matches. I think the Thieves one could be close, but when all is said and done, I kind of see an 0-2 weekend for LAG, which kind of sucks. I do want to see this team kind of surge up the standings. I think there's a lot of talent to be had, um, or there is a lot of talent on that team. Uh, yeah, it's tough though. I lean Optic. I imagine the money will continue to go on Optic as it always does. So, like I've said with a lot of these, the team I like, I think I prefer to take them early just based on what I think will happen earlier in the weekend and how I think people will come onto these teams as we get closer to match time. So it's Optic for me, but we'll see in a bit who I like for Optic phase the next day.
Yeah, I think we really do need to see some more matches for that game. But like again, if LAG starts doing has like a really good game against like game one or game two, start looking at that line, right? Start hitting that down, right? Map one hard point spread plus 1.5 at plus like plus two something, right? Like that. Start hitting those lines really quickly there. Next up, last game on Saturday, we have the New York Subliners versus Minnesota Rocker. Subliners plus 1.5 minus 170. Rocker minus 1.5 plus 130. Subliners plus 146 on the money line. Rocker minus 200. Subliners over 4.5 plus 160. Under 4.5 minus 210. I like this is weird. I like my model actually really kind of likes Minnesota here a little bit. It's kind of surprising to me. um, I don't know. My model does something really weird with the next New York game, especially. I think it's because the model does like New York in the hard points, but then it really likes Minnesota and the S&D and controls. Um, so I don't know what the I don't know here. I'm trying to figure out what the best option to play this is. Part of me says roll with New York here. But I don't know. It's kind of weird that I'm doubting the model a little bit that it's fading New York so much. I mean, again, we're still looking at the honeymoon period, but like this Minnesota team isn't bad, but this New York team is also not bad either, right? So I don't know. I'm a little torn on this one. I'm leaning towards leaving this one alone. I kind of don't want to touch this one. Maybe I might bet like New York plus 9.5 and get map on hard point or something like that. Um, but yeah, I don't. it's a weird one for me. What are your thoughts on this? Are you this is a weird my model's producing a weird result for this one, and I don't know what to feel about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just not interested in this game. That's coming from someone who's a fan of Minnesota. Like, I do think Minnesota get this done, but I think like a lot of their matches, it might be in 5 maps. Like Minnesota's search and destroy is good. Like we can bank on that being good. The rest of it is like it's just not pretty to watch this team. They get it done somehow. They've had 2 reverse sweep wins in qualifiers so far. One against the worst team in the league in Paris Legion, and one against a good team in LA Thieves. And then, if I remember correctly, their first match was against Toronto. I believe they lost in 4 maps. The only map they won was a 6-5 search that they almost blew. They were up 5-0, I think, and almost let Toronto win that with 6 in a row. But yeah, this Minnesota team, I mean, they're 2-2 so far. I cannot think of the loss that they had last week. Was it LAG? No. Um, I'm blanking. They beat Thieves. They lost to Boston. That's right. Boston beat them in a sweep, kind of convincingly. Yeah, they blew them out on Berlin, which that happens. It's Berlin. The Bocage went to around 11, and then Boston, like, good for them. They won the control 3-1. That was a much needed win in a control for Boston. Pretty convincing. Um, Yeah, I don't know. I kind of lean New York here. I don't love it. I don't think I'm going to touch it, but New York plus 1.5 at, I mean, it's minus 170. That does seem a little high. I just think these teams are really, really close in hardpoint and really, really close in control. And like, I don't think coin flip matters a lot here. Both these teams mediocre at both control maps. I have Minnesota ranked eighth on Gavudu and eighth on Tuscan. New York, I have ranked ninth on Gavudu and 11th on Tuscan. Um, so yeah, it might come down to who gets defense. Now we are playing on a new patch this weekend. That's maybe something we should have um, introduced earlier, or I'm not sure if that's confirmed, but there was an update this week to Vanguard where if you're playing rank play, you'll notice Bocage, the A bomb, is now outside on the platform, not inside the house. The spawns on Tuscan for defense have been moved up. Uh, on search and in control, that spawn has been moved up a little bit. Control now goes to ticks as the tiebreaker instead of kills. I think kills is now the second tiebreaker. Um, so we don't have that weird situation like last week where it kills as the first tiebreaker, it's tied. Okay, then we just go back to what was round one. Um, so yeah, if they are playing on that patch, which I suspect they will, um, we could see some funky results just based off of that. There are a lot of little things that went into that patch. I think it's maybe the biggest meta shift week to week that we've had so far. Maybe outside of like the first shift when like glide bombs didn't kill people at kickoff classic, and then once we got to qualifiers they did. That was a pretty big one, I guess. But yeah, this New York Minnesota match, like, I think Minnesota get it done. I think they get it done probably 3-2, and they leave people saying like, oh, Minnesota, there they go, they're clutching up again. Good for them for getting that mantra of the team that clutches up, but it's not a sign of a good team, right? Like, if you're Rocker, I really, as a fan, want to see them win in 4 or less, right? This New York team looked good last week with Paul X in the lineup. Granted, they're playing Paris, so we're working off a 1 game sample against the worst team in the league. Um, so yeah, I don't know. This one feels weird to me. And because of that, I think I'll stay away. As a Minnesota fan, I'll cheer for them. And yeah, I think Minnesota probably get it done 3-2, maybe a little value on New York to cover that map and a half.
Yeah, yeah, it's a weird. Like, this probably goes to 5 games. Maybe the over 4.5 is the right play here. Actually, what does my model have that at? I got 34% chance at a plus 160. I think that's about right in terms of break even. So that's not bad. I think that might be something to look at, the over 4.5. Next up, we're moving into Sunday now. Ravens versus Breach. Ravens minus 1.5 plus 150. Breach plus 1.5 minus 135. Ravens on the money line minus 175. Breach on the money line plus 135. Over 4.5 plus 160. Under 4.5 minus 210. So my model actually really likes Breach over London. My model's kind of out on London. They had a bad weekend against FaZe in some cases, but it was still close though, which is weird. My model kind of is really low on London right now, and I'm not sure if I like that or not. Or it's either I can't tell if it's really low on London or really high on Boston, or kind of a combination of both. I kind of think it's a mix of both, but like this line opened up at about even, I believe, and a lot of money's coming on London. I don't know if that's warranted. I kind of think that Breach has a decent chance here. Um, I definitely like the plus 1.5. I kind of like the money line here. What do you think? Are you has London is London fading a little bit for you, or do you think this is London on the coming back? They're gonna beat Boston and jump right into the winners bracket, and then they're fine. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they are definitely fading a bit. The result last week versus FaZe was, I would say, pretty expected. I think most people would have said that would be a 3-1 to FaZe, and it was. London looked convincing in the control on Gavudu. Granted, we've talked about Atlanta on Gavudu control quite a bit. They're just not good at it. Like, that's an issue if you want to be one of the best teams in the league. We're playing two control maps. If half of your qualifying matches come down to a coin flip, you're going to be playing Gavudu control half the time. Now, when Atlanta gets to the major and they're the higher seed in most of their matchups, they can veto that if they want. But again, if we get to a grand finals, you're going to have to play that. So control does matter quite a bit, and yeah, you've got to be at least balanced in your maps, and Atlanta just isn't right now. So London get that convincing win. Um, Game one on Gavudu, Atlanta win by 56. Pretty convincing. Gavudu can be a blowout map. Keeping it within 60 is okay for London, but still a relatively comfortable win for Atlanta. A very comfortable 6-2 on Bocage in the search. And then that fourth map, that hardpoint on Tuscan, got really interesting late. It looked like London might be bringing it back. I think it ended on a P1 on the third rotation. And yeah, Atlanta ended up winning that by 14 points. If a kill or two goes the other way, obviously a lot of those close hard points, that's how it ends. If the kills go the other way, the other team probably wins. But Atlanta hung on and clutched up. So yeah, maybe a little bit of a concerning loss for London when all is said and done, but I still do lean London a bit. I don't think I'm gonna take them. Like, this is the first weekend where my model has not been in love with London, and that in part could be part of their downfall. It could be part of like Boston's upswing here. So models doing some corrections just based on what we saw last week, but yeah, I think if you're gonna make me pick, I'll take the London minus a map and a half at plus 105. I know we saw Boston win in control last week. Good for them. I think it's still a concern. And I do think London are the better hardpoint team. As good as Boston has been, I just think London are still better. I kind of see a London 3-1. Wouldn't shock me if this goes to a map 5. If it does, I would favor Boston. I think their search is a little better than London's. Granted, I've talked about it all year. London's first blood percentage is still second in the league. They have fallen off a little bit as of late. Boston is sub 50% first blood percentage, but they're winning about 53, almost 54% of their rounds. So a pretty big discrepancy in terms of first bloods versus round wins with both of these teams. They're kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. So maybe closer to a 50-50 in search. London, I have favored in both respawn modes. I think Boston can get their wins on their own maps, but I just have a little more faith in London overall. Um, Granted, right, Boston's hot. Sometimes you don't want to step in front of these really, really hot teams, and I don't think I will. I think this is a pass for me, but I still like London. I have all year, and I'm not going to stop now.
That's fair. I mean, I actually I do have London. at some value to win the major. And I don't know. Again, I kind of like. I think Boston can beat London in this match. They have faded a little bit. They are 3-1. They probably are going to make winners bracket if they win or lose this. So we'll have to see. I don't know. It's interesting, right? Because depending on the next couple of games is going to depend on the seeding on some of these teams, and that might influence some futures bets. I'm going to take a look at the standings and see how things can break out. And because the thing is, again, if you're going to be the like if FaZe does lose to Florida, that changes a lot, right? Because suddenly that path to that final becomes a lot easier, especially for a Florida team, right? And that 28-1 bet comes just a little closer, right? So it's it the thing is like it's really gonna depend on who's in this main like because again you don't want to be the eighth seed, right? But like there's the sweet spot there of probably I think the because I think it's they set up the bracket. I have to look back at the bracket, but I think it's the 4-5. It's the way they set it up, right? Because you want to have to avoid optic or phase basically for the longest amount of time, right? So there's a sweet spot in there. Anyways, next up, second last match of this weekend, phase versus optic. Phase plus 1.5 minus 220. Optic minus 1.5 plus 165. Phase plus 110 on the money line. Optic minus 145. Phase over 4.5 plus 155. Optic under 4.5 minus 205. So this is kind of interesting because these two teams are both kind of in like a competition to see who's going to underperform. Well, Optic isn't underperforming that much, but like they're not looking particularly impressive. Like FaZe obviously didn't like they beat London, but not by a lot. That was a relatively close match against London. Like they won the hard points by what a combined 40 something points. Um, and like again, almost lost to Toronto, and arguably should have lost that game had Toronto not had Toronto not blown that game four. Toronto would have covered a -1.5 against them in that matchup. So FaZe has definitely underperformed, but at the same time, Optic again they were in trouble in a couple points against Seattle there on last weekend. And then again, when they played Florida, a 3-0. But again, a lot of pieces to that 3-0 were not a full 3-0, right? Like that could have been Florida could have been up 2-1 at the end of that game 3, right? If things break slightly differently in Florida, because Florida had multiple leads during that hard point, and again, that control was very close. So, like, I don't part of me just says bet like put like 2 units on phase plus 110 and then walk away and just enjoy the game. My model actually does favor phase here. I've got phase about 60-40. My model is really unimpressed with optic, but is also really unimpressed with phase too. So my gut just says bet phase and then just walk away because like the thing is how many and again this is another key point here how many times you can get phase at plus money, right? Like this is the only spot where you're gonna get phase at plus money, and phase should probably be favored here. If Optic was the underdog, I'd love to bet Optic here, but like I just think you bet phase. And the thing of it is, it's hard because at the same time, if phase loses to Florida, suddenly this line becomes plus 150, plus 200. At that point, you have to grab that line. But like, yeah, part of me just says phase plus 110, walk away, just sit back, get a drink, enjoy the game. What do you think?
I don't hate that. I just the thing with phase, and I can't stop talking about it because it is so important. Um, like they're kind of reliant on the coin flip. The Gavuda control is a huge concern, right? You don't want to have your control maps be such a discrepancy, and phase are like it's the biggest discrepancy between control maps for any team in the league. They're number one on Tuscan. They're 6-2. Some teams have better records, but they're killing teams on Tuscan. Like they're winning attack consistently. They're holding their defense consistently. Like they're very scary on Tuscan. Gavudu, they're 2-6. The exact opposite. That's 11th in win percentage. It's 11th in my power rankings. Like if the coin flip goes their way, I would make them a favorite against Optic on Tuscan Control, and then I think your plus 110 makes sense. So, by the coin flip theory of things, if FaZe win the coin flip, which is a 50-50 prop, otherwise known as even money, if it goes their way, the plus 110 maybe looks a little better. The thing is, if they don't, I really do worry about them. they're very good on Bocage. I think Optic are smart enough to ban that against them. I know Optic's good on Bocage too. I have them as the number 3 team. It's just I when Atlanta's as good as they are, right? I just worry about anyone versus them on that map. And yeah, I'm honestly very surprised you have FaZe favored by that much. I mean, I know Optic's recent results haven't been phenomenal, but they've won their last 10 matches. Like they're 10-0 in their last 10. That's remarkable when you think about it. FaZe are I think they're 2-1 in qualifiers. They lost. I mean, yeah, they're 2-2 in their last four. I don't want to go back further than that. Um, Granted, two of the well, one it was against Optic, and then their other loss was to who did they lose to this stage? Who am I blanking on?
Seattle.
Oh, Seattle. That's right, because Seattle is yeah, that makes sense. um, Yeah, so I like Optic a little. I don't love it. I'll see if the market moves a little bit. I do lean the -1.5 at plus 165. Again, the coin flip worries me though a little bit because I think if we're playing Tuscan, it's a different story. But yeah, I do have FaZe as slight favorites and a hard point. If these teams play two of them, I think they probably split. And then again, Search and Destroy is basically a toss up between these two teams. Um, yeah, I think a map 5 is really, really likely. If that's the case, the plus 110 makes a lot of sense. So, like, I can talk myself into both ways, right? The plus 110 makes some sense if you think FaZe maybe get the coin flip, or if they can at least force that game 5, right? Then you're sitting on a plus 110 and what should be a total coin flip of a map 5. But yeah, Optic. I think the I'd much rather take the -1.5 than the money line, just because I think if you can get your control map, that I don't want to say you can bank the Gavudu against Atlanta because Atlanta's a very very good team, but you're improving your odds a lot when you get that control you want, when you get that map 1 you want, you get preferred side in map 4, just a lot goes your way with the coin flip. So if I'm Atlanta, like from now on until champs against any like mediocre team, I want to play Gavudu control. Like I really do think they need to expand their map pool specifically with that map. Or, maybe there's some meta shift where we get a third control map in and that can change things. But until then, that's Atlanta's homework for me, right? Get better at that. There's a couple search maps they could improve on as well. But yeah, this should be a doozy of a match. Obviously, we saw these two teams face off in the Major One um, final and Major One semifinal, right? Was it winners final? Or no, it was actually round two. Yeah, which I think these teams could honestly meet again in when all is said and done. But slightly into Optic, but I don't love it. You can definitely take Atlanta if you like Atlanta.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's an important point. I think they do need to expand it. Apparently, they're talking about fixing Berlin if they could change the point, so that's a possibility. I think the I'm unsure if the patch is going for this weekend or for next weekend or what. 'Cause apparently, there's problems with some the patch breaks some things, so
Yes.
I'm not sure if they're gonna fix that or if because again they only have a couple days to fix it, so they might leave it for the major or I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna do. They have a couple options. But yeah, it's definitely interesting in terms of like I honestly I mean I don't know the thing is my model you have to remember that my model like takes into account like recent performances, so like it doesn't like it thinks Optic has been underperforming and like FaZe beat a decent Ravens team and then they also beat a decent-ish Toronto team, but like they just think Optic is underperforming what they should be against like Florida and the other teams. So it's weird. I get it, but I don't know. I just think this might be. And again, FaZe has lost how many coin flips now? Like they just seem to always play Gavudu control, and I literally every time they play Gavudu control, I just bet against them to lose the Gavudu control, and then I just like I cashed Toronto plus 240 against them in the Gavudu control. So yeah, it's now that being said, that was very close though. That was like terrifyingly close. And Toronto arguably should have lost that. But again, yeah, it's weird. So moving on to the last game of the weekend, Subliners versus Ultra. Subliners plus 1.5, minus 115. Ultra minus 1.5, minus 115. Subliners plus 195 on the money line. Toronto Ultra minus 275. Over 4.5, plus 175. Under 4.5, minus 230. So my model has done something weird yet again, and it says that this is basically a toss up. It's basically even. It says like New York has a 48% chance to win this match, which is weird. And I'm trying to figure out why. It thinks New York's a better hardpoint team, and it thinks they're basically even in the search. And I think that's the reason why this is such a close game. Also, I just want to point out that the for on my board I have over 4.5. Atlanta Optic. That is the highest likelihood to go over 4.5 maps. So of all the maps I have, that's
For
one of the only.
sure,
Yeah,
for
that's the
sure.
that one and Ellie like Thieves Gorillas are both the highest for over 4.5s. Next to, of course, Seattle and LA Thieves is again, but it's still a couple points lower. So yeah, that over that plus 155 for the over 4.5 and that one, that's actually not that bad. I should really start playing maps overs a lot more often. But no, yeah, I think there's some value on subliners plus 1.5. Remember, again, this is do or die for subliners, right? They won their match last week. Great, good for them. Now they got to beat Minnesota, and if they beat Minnesota and then they come here against Ultra, like then this is basically the winner of this match will go 3-2. I think the winner of that would then go to the winners bracket if I'm not mistaken. So it's really kind of interesting to see. This could be like this is do or die for some of these teams here. Yeah, I might take subliners. I think subliners this game it's up there for odds to go to a game 4. It's not fully there, but it's up there. Yeah. Um what are your thoughts? Do you have subliners making this competitive or not?
It's I don't know, man. Subliners are just hard to figure out. And we were saying this right before they added Paul with the team change. I liked him, right? I thought Paul X would be a welcome addition. It wasn't confirmed that he was going to be on the team, but it was New York was a slight favorite to Paris. We liked him last week, right? Paul X gets added to the roster officially. They take care of business. That seemed like an easy pick. I don't know now, right? Like, are people really convinced that like Paul X makes the difference? Maybe. I do think he is a better shooter than Clayster. Like gun skill purely, he's better. I do think New York lose a little bit on the side of leadership. Maybe it's for the better, right? Maybe Krim and Clay were butting heads a little, right? You don't want necessarily too many shot callers on a team or too dominant shot callers if they're at odds. That can be confusing at times or hard for the team to figure out. So maybe it is for the better, right? Krim gets to go on the full AR now. Maybe the roles right just work out now. In New York, like a very realistic chance that they could end up in winners bracket. And honestly, I was going to make a comment about this match and how it shouldn't be the last match on Sunday. But now that I'm thinking about it, this could be yeah, this could be enormous. Right now, these teams are sitting at 8th and ninth in the standings. Toronto and New York are both 1-2. The difference between them right now, Toronto are 7-7 in map count. New York are 4-7. And yeah, like this week, both have I don't want to say easy matches, but Paris for Toronto, and then you get New York. That's very nice. And then New York, you get Toronto in this match, and you get Minnesota the day before. And I've talked about Minnesota a lot, right? They're I think clearly not a top 6 team. They definitely struggle in some key aspects of the game. So yeah, this could be for winners bracket here. And that basically if you lose this, it pulls your odds of winning the major down to effectively 0, right? Because again, you got to win 6 in a row at the major, and while there is a chance that that happens, it's remarkably difficult. Um, I lean Toronto just slightly. Yeah, I'm seeing minus 115 on the minus 1.5. Um, but again, it might be a stay away for me because right, New York might be very much improved based on Paul X. I want to see more of it. I liked what I saw last week, but right? Big but the caveat is it was Paris, right? And honestly, Paul X, he didn't shine, but his teammates did. And maybe honestly that's a better sign for New York. The fact that Paul X comes in, he doesn't put up great numbers, but everyone else looks better. Like that might be better than if Paul X comes in, he looks great, and everyone else still looks like what they did. So the fact that he could come in and get an easy win right away, that speaks volumes to how good of a player he is and maybe how good of a roster move it was. But I just the sample size is one. I gotta see more. I think we'll have a very good idea where New York is after this weekend. Because it's not the worst competition in the world with Minnesota and Toronto, but we might still be asking those questions like if New York run into a London, if they run into an Atlanta, like how well do they compete against those teams? Because I think it's fair to say Minnesota, Toronto are not quite in that upper tier of teams quite yet. They've shown flashes, right? Minnesota has the ice, right? They just keep winning in these reverse sweeps and these map fives. In Toronto, right early in the year, kickoff classic winners. They have a good showing at Major One despite not winning a hard point, right? If they can correct those hard point issues, they should be okay. I think there's more to it than that, but yeah, the more I think about it, the more I'm excited for this match. So, um, yeah, I was gonna say put this match as the first one and let Atlanta Optic be the last one, but I don't mind it because I think the consequences could be huge. I do like Toronto to win. I got them winning about 3/4 of the time, but again, if this Paul X move is as good as advertised, based on last week, it could be, closer to a 60-40 game, but I do still think Toronto are definitely the favorites to win.
Yeah, I mean it's gonna be interesting. It's that last games could be very interesting. I don't know. Like this Toronto team is another team where you could see you could see a team change, right? Like I could see a team change there. Again, if subliners go win these next two games, great, right? Good for them. If not, then like Neptune could be on the way out, right? Or Clayster, right? Like not Clayster, Crib, right? So lots of different. Sorry, yawning. We're doing this one late at night. This is LeanTossup after dark. No, no. I mean, this is yeah. Like, there's um, a lot of really interesting matchups this weekend, and they're gonna have a huge importance for next week. And I'm sure we'll talk about those next weekend. So next week. So thank you everybody for tuning in and watching and listening. Sorry, they're on YouTube too if you want to check us on YouTube. But thank you for listening. You can follow Ryan at CDLMetrics. Obviously, follow on Lead Toss Up. We're gonna have projections, and yeah, we'll see you next week to talk about our best bets for the major. See you then, everybody.